Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
So, as we said, today's talk is called Politics and Conspiracy. And let me tell you a bit about Miriam Delicado. If you don't already know, Miriam is a world-renowned UFO contactee, a luminary and inspirational speaker, healer. She does a lot of work with the Indigenous people around the world. And she also is the author of Blue Star Prophecy. She is a humanitarian, a teacher, and so much, a conference speaker, all of these wonderful things that I really, really enjoy. But I think most importantly, she's one of my dearest, dearest friends, and I'm so grateful that she is joining us here today. So without further ado, welcome to the Just Bernard Show, Miriam. How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing very well, and thank you again, Bernard, for all of the wonderful support and having me on your program. That was quite the intro. You know, one of the reasons why I love to come on your show is because it feels like we're sitting in the living room just having a chat, you know. And
I love that.
It's fantastic, and it's great to be able to really speak, you know, my thoughts and my own personal journey with you and sharing it with the audience. So today we're going to be talking about politics and conspiracy, which is a subject. These two things I don't normally talk about, especially conspiracy theories. It's something that I've actually shied away from in my public persona, let's say, because I find that conspiracies can really be very misdirecting and confusing and harmful. So this is one of the reasons why I don't talk about conspiracies very often. And when I do, I try to find a more realistic approach to them rather than just a complaining voice, but one that says, what do we need to do in order to make a better world?
Yeah.
So we were talking a couple of weeks ago, you and I, about the political situation in the United States, in particular with the presidential running mates, and how chaotic it is.
Absolutely. Let me just jump in here, Miriam, because I want our listeners to know how much you do not talk about this. And I was just thinking right before the show, and I mentioned it to you, that you and I have been close friends for several years now, and even in our personal talks, you haven't even spoken about this. This is not something that you talk about. It's not. And I'm really grateful that even though we never talk about it personally, you're going to be speaking about it today. And I'm wondering what inspired you to want to do this talk.
There has been so many very important subjects, let's say. One, the presidential presidential nominations in the United States. A lot of talk about disclosure. A lot of talk about world finances. There's a number of things that are going on with the Pope right now. These are very, very, very big issues that are global, that affect us globally. And I think that in the world of conspiracy, this has been this is a hard subject matter, because I am not an expert in any one of those areas, but I have a viewpoint, and that's what I want to share today, is just my view of what it is that I'm seeing. When it comes to conspiracies, there's so many things that are happening with the vaccinations, with, let's continue the list, with vaccinations, with the pharmaceutical companies, with pesticides, with Monsanto, with the political system of the structures of countries. We just had the release of the Panama Papers. Whistleblowers are being thrown into prisons for the rest of their lives, or being, told they're the ones that are the criminals. Conspiracies have moved from the dark into the light. They have come from the shadows into the mainstream. And this is a great thing. And I have always sort of in the background, in some ways, supported the conspiracy theorist movement, but not necessarily always their technique in how they come forward with their information. And in order for us to be able to change our planet, we have to be able to understand what it is that we're facing. And if we don't know what the issues truly are, the corruption that's taking place within the major corporations that are out there, the corruption, and it is corruption. If we don't understand how governments and corporations fit together, we cannot reinstate or remodel a system that's going to be working for humanity into the future. There is so much that's happening in the way of conspiracies that it's frightening, because one of the things that I see, and one of the things that motivated me to want to come and share this, was the fact that I see the word propaganda, okay? Propaganda is the misdirection of information. Propaganda is used to influence the people to have one thought. And I see propaganda being used in a way that is so disgustingly blatant in today's world that everyone even knows that it's propaganda, but they're still using it anyway in order to make a point. Now, on my quote Facebook wall, I've recently been talking about the political presidential nominees in the United States. I'm Canadian. I don't even have the right to vote in the United States, but I take an interest in it because I believe that Donald Trump, for example, is one of the darkest souls, and he is a master of propaganda. And this is what motivated me to make this, to be on this program. Donald Trump has literally, like any good sociopath, has looked at the world and said, you know what? I don't like this and this and this, and I want it to change. Well, good for him. He wants to break up the big banks. He wants to, change the financial situation of the country of the United States. He wants this, he wants that. Some of the things that he wants, the conspiracy theorists want. And he used that. He went to Alex Jones, right?
Oh, I didn't know that. Oh, my.
And he used Alex Jones, and now Alex Jones has become his big, Trump. Yeah, great, Trump.
Oh, my.
So you think that isn't propaganda? Do you think that that's not misdirection? Do you think the guy has incited violence for the first half of his presidential nomination tour? He has incited violence. Oh, if you go out and hit them, I'll pay for it. I'll pay for the legal fees.
Right.
And then the worst part is that these dumbed down, boy, am I going to be in trouble after this program, these dumbed down Trump supporters who believe that they are part of the conspiracy theorist movement in the bringing about a better world, who are spiritual, are now coming forward saying, yeah, well, he was taken out of context. Really? What part of out of context did I hear when he said I could walk up to someone on the street, shoot them in the head in front of people, and they would still love me and vote for me?
In Times Square, yeah.
In Times Square. What part of out of context did I hear? This is propaganda. He is using this platform to create something, and people are so dumbed down that they don't even realize that this man is a sociopath who is running for president, and using maybe what he wants. Sure, maybe part of what he wants, he's looking for as well, in order to make America great again. Maybe he's not making enough money in America anymore. Maybe just maybe he is such a supremacist, white supremacist, I'm going to say it, that he doesn't want to go into another country because he doesn't like them. Maybe that's what it is. Should I say that? The thing is, I'm very passionate about this because I do not like what I'm hearing from the community in any direction regarding Trump. No one is looking at this from a rational, calm point of view. And I'm not calm about it anymore, because what I see is that Trump has literally divided people everywhere, including within the conspiracy movement, including within the spiritual movement. So is this truly what it is that people want? Is this really what they want? One of the people out there who is a Trump supporter, who I love very much, we respect each other. She respects the fact that I am not a Trump supporter and I'm completely against him, and she respects that with me. So we don't go and attack each other over it, but we certainly recognize that there is some truths in what it is that Trump is saying, and I believe that. But why are people so stupid when it comes to the fact, and I'm sorry I'm using such strong language, but I'm very upset about this. Why are people not waking up to the fact that you can't tell me that I'm not looking at what he's saying rationally when they're not able to explain to me, how can you support a man who says that he could kill someone in Times Square and that it's okay? Answer that question for me first, and then we can start having a conversation. Now, when it comes to conspiracies, this is what happens. Arguments, anger, resentment, attacks. This is what a conspiracy does to people. Because until they wake up to the truth and the actual truth of what's happening, there is always going to be conflict around it. And that's not what I'm about. I'm not about conflict. I'm about resolving conflict. So what I'm saying is that with this presidential situation, with Clinton coming forward, now she's on the bandwagon to say, oh, let's go to the conspiracy theorist group. Let's go to them now. Yeah, let's jump on the bandwagon and say that I'm going to give them disclosure. Are you kidding me? Why on earth would I want to jump onto that bandwagon and give someone like Clinton the power over what information comes forward regarding disclosure and what information does not come forward regarding disclosure? Am I truly that dumbed down and stupid as well?
Right.
So these two nominees right here are, this is why I've become passionate about the political situation, because no matter who runs the United States, we have to recognize that the way the system works in the United States, and I'm not an expert, I'm an observer, I'm a human being that cares about people, the planet, the environment, the future, humanity, the indigenous. We must take a moment to sit back and look at things rationally and logically. If we don't, we're buying into some kind of propaganda. And I don't care what political party it is that you are looking at. If we can't sort of look at it from what's truly happening and not taking a side even with them, then we're not looking at the political situation, for example, with clarity, because we're being we're just being used. We're following along like sheep.
Mm-hmm.
So what we need to do is stop, calm down, look at the situation and say, okay, I agree with you that Trump should not have said that, but do you not believe that he's making a point when he says this, this, and this? Absolutely. There are things that Trump's saying that I completely agree with. Completely.
Right.
In regard to how it works, how all of this works in quote, the conspiracy movement, is that the conspiracy movement has worked very hard in bringing all of these things that were previously in the dark out into the light, and it has made an impact. It has made it not as easy for people to do business. But one thing that am I rambling? Did you want to jump in here with anything?
No, I do have a comment after you finish this thought, though.
Okay, go ahead, please.
One of the things that I find, well, very inspiring, and your passion about this particular topic, and I feel that this is very close to everyone's heart, whether it be in the conspiracy movement or in the spiritual movement, is, like you said, a lot of these problems have been brought to the surface through the conspiracy movement, through the quote-unquote truth movement, light worker movement, spiritual movement. And I feel that the reason why I am so passionate is that we have come to realize through these movements, through this information being brought to light, that the problem is systemic, and that, here we are, within these movements, we talk about divisive tactics, divide and conquer, divide and conquer. That's what the global elite want and whatnot. But yet, it amazes me how the propaganda, like you said, and the campaigning that Trump has done might have a piece of that, but it's not leading to that, and it's not utilizing the tactics of bringing people together. It's bringing divisiveness. We had a guest on about a month or so ago, Wei Sang, and he was talking about the movement over in the UK and how they have their own version of Bernie Sanders, and how the Bernie Sanders message and this gentleman, I forgot his name, over in the UK, also have the same message of systemic change, of message of empowering all people, bringing equality for all people, and getting the dirty politics out of the system and reconstructing the system. So I feel that a lot of this passion comes from the fact that we're hearing some of those words, but we're not hearing the complete message. And it amazes me how those of us who, quote unquote, should know better, are jumping on the bandwagon with one of these political demagogues, for lack of a better term, Trump or Clinton. I don't want to campaign for Bernie Sanders, but I will say that his message is more in line with what the conspiracy folks have been talking about all along. So I'm a little perplexed in all of that. But yes, I do feel that the passion comes from the fact that we have a greater vision of what the world is supposed to be. All of this work within the conspiracy movement, all of the work in the spiritual movement, is to bring about that global dynamic change. And Trump only hints to that. He's utilizing tactics that we're supposedly not supporting, but we're supporting him. What do you think?
Very, very, very well said. Very well said. Because he is using quote unquote tactics. Now, the thing about Trump is that I'm not sure where he was. I think it was in Utah. It was after Utah. Something happened around that time, and his quote wife came forward and said, start acting presidential. And he then started to come forward and said, my wife told me I need to start acting more presidential. And after that, he did. And then all the propaganda came out saying, oh, I'm please forgive me again, I'm going to be really blunt here. This African-American man, to be PC, politically correct, African-American man came forward in this video and said, I went to a Trump in Arizona, and I wanted to see what happened there, and I was treated really well, and everything was great, and da-da-da. It's like, hey, were you there for the prior the prior gatherings that he had before Arizona? Were you there when he was making and inciting all of this anger and resentment towards people? No. So there was a switch in him because he realized he needed to switch it up, and it's too late because the people saw who he truly was and what he was doing. I saw that. Now, if he would have started out and kept his dirty little secrets in the darkness, then people wouldn't have known that, and maybe his message would be even more powerful. But guess what? That backfired on him because his dirty little secrets he decided to reveal. Because why? In my opinion, he felt that he was so completely untouchable because of what? Money. I am the man. I have the money. Well, guess what, people, conspiracy theorists? We're not looking at, if we want to talk about what and who the conspiracies are all built for, it's for the elite, and he is one of the elite. So I want to leave Trump out of this and move on because I want to talk about other things other than just him, because I'm not just completely against Trump. I'm using that as an example of what a conspiracy is all about. Okay. He went to Alex Jones, and Alex Jones all of a sudden becomes his Pied Piper.
That's crazy.
Crazy. What is that? Why is Alex Jones jumping on the Pied Piper? That to me made me look at Alex Jones, which I have never been a supporter of, because he also is very much into the conspiracies in the dark, and that's not my job. I don't want to be a part of that world. I support that information coming forward.
Yeah.
My role is something else. I prefer to work, with my nonprofit, with Blue Star, and look at humanitarian issues and world issues for the environment rather than the conspiracies.
Well, the reality of it is that Alex Jones, while his information might be very important, the way he presents it is basically fear pornography for profit. And, when we're looking at it from a spiritual point of view, that vibration is no different than the quote unquote, vibration of the global elites that we're trying to stop. So how can we end all that darkness by, trying to end it through darkness, is the way I look at it. And just a quick note, I'm noticing here on the chat room, someone was kind enough to tell me who the gentleman was in the UK that I'm talking about. Jeremy Corbyn is the gentleman's name.
Okay. So, what we have here is a lot of misdirection. And regardless of who this is, they are going to be using misdirection, because that's what conspiracy lives and thrives on, is misdirection, disinformation. Conspiracies thrive on disinformation. So what I'm saying in all of the political parts of what's happening with not only within the United States, but around the world, we have to look at what the systems are that have created these disastrous situations. In Brazil, for example, my friends in Brazil have been telling me for the last couple of years that they're on the brink of collapse there because of the political mishandling of just about everything there is. It's really, really difficult in Brazil. Presidents are being thrown out of office. What's the country that happened in just recently?
Iceland. Again, the prime minister resigned.
In Rome, a couple of years ago, the banks traded over to private bankers. It was kind of bought out by private bankers, and my friends in Italy have told me that the banking system is so bad and corrupt now that nobody has any money. And that, so there's big conspiracies that are happening here. Most of them, almost all of them, are based on money, greed, and power. So when we look at anything, how do we get to the truth of anything? Here's my opinion. And I'm sure that we're going to wrap this up for the commercial in just a moment. We'll leave this for the thought. How do you get through any kind of a conspiracy to find out what the truth is? You look for the pattern of you look for the patterns. One of the things with, for example, Bernie Sanders in the U.S. presidential running, he has a history of standing up for every single point that the conspiracy theorist people out there, the Trump supporters, want, and yet they don't like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Propaganda.
Yeah.
Works in mysterious ways. And we have to be very cautious about what that propaganda is and what that misdirection is and what the reality is. So certainly Trump may be upset about the same issues, and he decided he was going to be the one to go out and do it. But I will tell you this, recently I saw Trump come out in the public in a blurb, and he said, "You don't see what's happening." He said, even Bernie Sanders has had some of the largest turnouts, and it is not on mainstream television.
No.
So now, even with Trump, he is directing people to Bernie Sanders to say, look. And I was very happy that Trump did that, and I was grateful that he finally started to do that as well.
And we're here at our commercial break, and when we return, we're going to continue this very exciting.
And now, back to your host, Bernard Alvarez.
And welcome back to the Just Bernard Show here on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com. We are the #1 listener-supported radio station in the world. So please remember to support Revolution Radio by making a contribution. You can do that and just click on the donate button and keep all of these programs on the air. So thank you for that. Welcome back to the show, Miriam. And we were talking about something earlier, and I just want to bring this up before we move on to more exciting topics. You mentioned something about, Trump being, the elite. And one of the things that I feel, and I'm wondering if you're seeing this as well, is that within the conspiracy movement, or even within the political activist movement, there's always been a call to remove oligarchy. Oligarchy meaning, the rich people's club. And, here we have Trump, here we have Hillary Clinton, both major, mega, global oligarchs, not even on a national level, but on a global level. We have, oligarchy, and yet we're thinking that Trump is going to change things. And it's creating more divisiveness. What are your thoughts on using oligarchy to remove oligarchy in the conspiracy world?
Well, that's what I'm saying, is that are we not thinking about what it is that we're seeing in front of us? People are not thinking about what it is that's in front of them, whether they're a conspiracy theorist or they're a non-conspiracy theorist. They're not looking at what it is that's right in front of them. We have to address these issues with a rational mind, and we have to be able to look at what it is that's sitting right in front of us with clarity. And I don't believe that anyone unless we can have that conversation for both sides of the coin, then we're not looking at it rationally. So I just see that it's a very confusing subject matter, because certainly, who am I to say? Maybe he would come in and make all of these sweeping changes, and that would be great. But the fact is that he's a self-righteous elite. Yeah. And the reason that he felt that he could say, I could shoot someone in Times Square in the head and people would still vote for me, there is one reason that he said that, and that is because he feels privileged.
Yeah. Now, speaking of, and kind of moving on to another subject, but yet I do want to acknowledge that out of all of the candidates that are running in the United States, only one candidate has been endorsed by or even is having dialogue with the indigenous people of the United States, and that's Bernie Sanders. Many people seem to forget how much harm people like Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump and his businesses, or even the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, how much harm either they're ignoring indigenous issues or literally just stealing land and whatnot. Bernie Sanders has literally come out and said, if he becomes president, he is going to begin working to return sacred sites back to the indigenous people. Nobody is talking about that. And I'm wondering, where does this all fall in with you working with the Indigenous? How do you see this situation and what's going on with the Indigenous in general?
Well, I want to try and get to, because we only have about 20 minutes, and so I
Yeah.
really want to cram this in, because I want to talk about Monsanto, and I'd like to talk about and get into this with the Indigenous. One of the things that I have been sort of one of the things that I have witnessed myself with my own eyes and my physical self is what happens and is happening within, quote, Indigenous communities. I have said for many, 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 many years, if somebody truly wants to know what the word conspiracy actually is, why it's there, how it works, what it looks like, what it feels like, what the end result is, and the tactics that are used, get yourself into the heart of any Indigenous community. The reason why the Indigenous are so crystal clear about when they do come out and make statements about what's happening, the propaganda that gets pushed back onto them about why not to listen to them, for example. Oh, they're all a bunch of drunks. They're all alcoholics. They're lazy. They don't want anything in their homes. There's an Indigenous community in the United States. I'm not going to get into names, and it's not Hopi, by the way, because people always assume that.
Right.
But one in particular that doesn't allow any kind of economic development without the approval of the United States government. You're not allowed to do anything there for economic development unless you get the approval of the United States government. And that is an absolutely perfect example of how they control the Indigenous communities from my own experience.
Right.
They have control. They want clean water. No, you're not allowed to do that unless you do all of these things first. Well, we don't have the money for that ourselves. Oh, where's the money supposed to come from? It's supposed to come from the federal governments. Well, when it doesn't come from the federal governments, nothing happens. Now, the United States in the treaties said, we're going to shove you onto this land, and we're going to, and by doing so, and you accepting all of this, we have a responsibility to take care of you, give you everything that you need. And that responsibility, the governments have said, no, we're not going to do it anymore. We're not doing it. We're just going to leave you. This is why these people are all fighting for what they're fighting for, because they were given that agreement. And then they were controlled to the point where they couldn't go into any kind of economic development. They're not allowed to do what they want. They're completely controlled by different aspects of government, whether it's even the Indian Affairs or the BIA or the state or the federal government or someone. So they're kind of sitting there going, vroom, vroom, vroom. And meanwhile, they're coming in and trying to take things over. Now, there's a couple of issues that I was very vocal with, and you helped to get the message out a few years ago in direct relation to Hopi, for example. And that was two things. One, that Senator McCain from Arizona, John McCain from Arizona, who I think is one of the worst political representatives in the United States that I've personally seen, because he has billions. Him and his wife, they're billionaires, and they walk in and they're destroying, they're taking Indigenous lands left, right, and center. They just recently did that and brought a bill before the Senate to take away sacred site lands from an Indigenous group in Arizona. They recently did that. Oh, boo-hoo, people say. The conspiracy theorists, oh yeah, but. Really? This man and his political system that's in place and his personal money is bringing mining companies to all of these different Indigenous all over the United States, and no one seems to be paying attention to that. I would say that that's a conspiracy. Start looking it up and researching it. I'm not going to give you all the details here. But Senator McCain also has been working for, and others have been working for at least 30 years 30 years to be able to access pristine aquifer water underneath the Arizona desert. And whose land is it over top of? It's over top of the Navajo and the Hopi. Well, the way that these conspiracies are working are really interesting because it's all in darkness. Senate bill gets brought before the Senate, and here's the bill. We're going to do this, 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 and this. But then there's attachment bills with the House that are attached to those bills. And if you pass the Senate bill, everything that it's attached to that's behind it in the darkness gets passed as well. Well, interestingly, when the Hopi called me a few years ago, the traditional Hopi called me a few years ago and said, look, one of our most how can I say this? One of their prophecies was unfolding in front of their eyes. And they were told in their prophecy that if this were to happen, they were to do anything that they could within their power to stop it from happening. And that was that their water would be taken away. And the traditional Hopi contacted me and said, we want your help to get this message to the world. We can't allow this to happen. And I was honored to be able to support that, along with there were several other people that helped with this as well, you being one of them. And we brought the pressure back down from the outside in to the best of our ability. Now, luckily, the Senator McCain was not able to pass that. Senator McCain and Senator Kyle tried to bring that in, and they've worked 30 years to make that happen, and luckily it didn't. If it were to have passed, here's what would have happened for the corporation standing behind it was that Peabody Coal would have had a 22-year extension lease. All past, present, and future damage that they may have done was they were exempt from. Okay. And I can't remember, I don't have all of the details in front of me, but X amount of the water was to go to Peabody Coal, and I think there was 2 other corporations that were mentioned, and that's where the water would have went. All of the payment that would have gone to the Hopi was if I remember correctly, $165 million. The $165 million was then going to create a new pipeline that would take 20 years to build. And I'm sure that the 165 would have turned into 300 million. And then where would they have gotten the other the other millions from? At the end of it, they'd be left with nothing. But again, going back to the beginning of the conspiracy, they were told that they would be taken care of. And they haven't been given clean water. They haven't been given the proper resources. And what people don't realize is that this was the agreement. They're not saying, I want to sit around and do nothing and I want you to serve me, but you have to give me basic life needs. So in respect to conspiracies that are happening within the United States and within countries around the world, having had access to different Indigenous peoples and being able to go into the heart of those Indigenous communities, I have seen and witnessed for myself. I have heard, sorry, it gets a little emotional. I haven't cried for a while on one of your programs. It's very difficult to be able to look at an Indigenous community and hear the heartbreaking stories of how they were destroyed, killed, thrown into churches, thrown into, beaten, everything, killed, maimed, raped, hacked up into pieces, all sorts of horrific things that happened in their history. And people have the audacity to think that those things are not happening today. Well, guess what? They are still happening, but they are happening in a different way. And that is what propaganda is. It is a misdirection of thought. It's giving people something else to think about. And within Indigenous communities, there is a clear pattern of how to break down society, how to first break it down, and then it becomes destroyed. And I remember that one of the things that they don't want is they don't want to be living this way. They want the land to be taken care of and respected, and that's what Indigenous communities all over the world are fighting for.
Yeah.
So, again, looking at it from a rational point of view, okay, so the Hopi and the Navajo have all of this water. Why should they keep it? That people say they shouldn't be doing that. The number one thing that came up every meeting that ever happened that I was around, every time they would talk about this, they would say, why would we give this pristine water away for it to be used for golf courses in Phoenix?
Right.
And to be given to slurry coal, to push coal through pipelines so that it can go from one location to the next? Why would we give our water away for that? So it's not the fighting as in you can't have the water. It's we have to manage it properly. And the people are saying we need to manage the water because we understand the value of it. So this is something that's happening, and they've been going after the water. We only have 10, 12 minutes left. Let's talk about Monsanto.
Oh, yeah.
Monsanto, I have come out since 2007 into the public. And the very, very first interview that I ever did was with Carrie Cassidy from Project Camelot. Bless her heart, her and Bill came, and Bill Ryan, and interviewed me. And we talked about seeds, heritage seeds, because Monsanto, I call it Monsanto the Destroyer, because Monsanto is creating a world that is genetically modified without understanding the true ramifications of that modification.
Yep.
And so who is in control of the energy, the water, the minerals? Who is in control of the food and the money? When we look at these things, this is the conspiracy. Who controls these things controls humanity and controls the future of this planet. So when we're looking at conspiracies, we can't be looking at any of it, in my opinion. We cannot look at anything that has to do with a conspiracy with just limited blinder vision on. We have to look at it as in, this is about humanity's future. And we have to start looking at the conspiracies are all built to control the masses, to consume. And if we don't stop consuming, we are all not going to have a future. Future generations will not be here. And I am going to do everything within my power to ensure that from my perspective, that I'm doing the best that I can each day, which is not perfect. No. But it is trying to support a natural, balanced future for our planet. And that's the thing, is that Indigenous communities are fighting for their land, literally fighting for their land and their people and their ceremonies and their right to their way of life. That's what they're fighting for.
Right.
In Hopi, okay, many years ago, it was 2010 actually, I was out there for 5 months fighting. Yes, it was like fighting to protect the Hopi from a new constitution that was being bring in. This was very, very public. And I was out there for 5 months bringing all the attention into Hopi as much as humanly possible. And I think I did it. I'm very proud of that body of work because it was really substantial. And people from all over the world rallied in order to help the Hopi.
Yeah.
What was happening was they were trying to bring in a new constitution that would replace their current constitution. Well, the problem was that in the current constitution, there is a paragraph that states that the government side of Hopi itself is in place and must protect the ceremonies and traditions. I can't remember the wording, please forgive me. Ceremonies, traditions, and Hopi way of life. And so that's in their current constitution. The new constitution eradicated that and then if you read the whole Constitution with real clarity, what you found was that in understanding how the law works and how constitutional law works, which I have a base understanding of, what would have happened is that the current chairman within Hopi itself would have been the one person that could have overwritten everything, like the president of the United States can overwrite anything. He could have overwritten anything with one pen, so he could have just gone in and made an agreement for that water and be done with it. Would have been done. Okay? Well, when that was happening, we found out, I was actually scared. I was actually nervous for my life at that time, because it was so heated with the government. And I mean, we're talking all the way up to the president, the Secretary of Interior, BIA, Senate, Congress, everything. All of the governments were involved in this new constitution and the water issue. And that's what I kept saying to the Hopi. What is it that they're after? Because they're after something. Because here's what we found out. We found out that at least 5 other tribes in the region, all dotting the area around Hopi, had been given the exact same constitution, or almost identical constitution, within the few years prior, and that 3 out of the 5, I believe it was, that had signed that new constitution, the US government had to step in and completely take over the entire tribal financial everything. They had to take everything and throw out the councils, because there was a clause in the Constitution that said, if you're on the council and you steal $5 million from your tribe, you can't be charged as long as you're sitting on the council. So these people were just taking all of the money and doing with it what they wanted, and not doing, and they couldn't be charged with it. So their fiscal responsibility was not being held, being taken care of responsibly. And so they had to go in and step in. The United States government had to step in and, quote, take over. Interesting.
Unbelievable.
Years later, we ended up being faced with the Senate bill in order for them to be able to sorry, you just said 2 minutes. I've got a message, 2 minutes, so I've got to wrap this up. So what I'm saying in this program is that conspiracies are go far deeper than what we're seeing on the surface. Propaganda is used every day to misdirect your attention. That when we're talking about conspiracies, we have to bring them into light, but we have to do it in a responsible manner, in one that is looking at all sides of the issue and not just one of them. If we're talking about anything from presidents and prime ministers all the way down to community level politics, everything from Monsanto to what's happening with the Indigenous, our water, our land, our air, our minerals, our fuel, and our food. We need to look at all of it. We can't just keep continuing to look at one part of it and then agreeing with someone. So in saying that, thank you for letting me have this hour rant about conspiracies, and please take time to look at the issues from all sides and then make an informed decision. Back.
Beautifully said. Thank you, Miriam. And what a wonderful way to wrap it up. I want to thank you for joining us. I love you dearly, Miriam. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Next week, I am going to be speaking to a Native American spiritual teacher, Azrae Windwalker, will be joining me live. We'll be here same time.